Such an integral part of South Africa's social and political structure and narrative. And the story of his life, as beautifully captured in a biography by Bryan Rostron, is almost like deja vu, because in a different way and form, the older Robert McBride continues to actively challenge the system, albeit from the other side of the fence. The book was first published in 1991, then called Till Babylon Falls, and was re-released in South Africa last year. The former director of the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, IPID, Robert McBride, thanks for making the time to come through this morning, and thanks for so graciously agreeing to stay on, because your interview was supposed to be much earlier. I suppose we have to start the conversation with acknowledging your dad and his passing, and passing condolences.
Thank you very
once
much.
Again. The depiction of your relationship with your dad in the book takes one to former President Thabo Mbeki's description of his relationship with Govan Mbeki, saying he was more a comrade than a father. Would you say that's the correct depiction of your relationship with your dad?
Indeed it is. I mean, you don't want to detract from the fact that the person, my dad, was a comrade and activist and revolutionary in his own right. In his own right. Right, yeah. And I just happened to be his child, also been activist in my own right. Yeah. So I think it's fair to make the analogy between former President Mbeki and his dad and myself and my dad. Yeah.
What can we take away from the fact that when the book first came out, it was talking about history, and in 2020, we're still dealing with challenges of schools that don't have proper infrastructure. We still deal with corruption in 2020.
Well, I think the first thing is to acknowledge that we've done an enormous amount since '94, and we've had to push back a lot of poverty, a lot of inequality, lots of deprivation. We've had millions of people who now have running water in their homes, millions more with electricity. We have schools, clinics, and all of that built. Unfortunately, we've also not been able to do it fast enough. So the demand is exceeding our ability to provide the services.
So you agree with the sentiment that says the narrative of inequality in the country disregards the other side, which is the amount of work that has been done?
Absolutely, yeah. So if there wasn't a concerted effort with the various programs by government to actually provide for those who didn't have, then we wouldn't have been as far as we are now. So all we have to do is actually work harder, put our shoulder to the wheel, and work with greater, tenacity of purpose. But it would be wrong to say that nothing has been done, because quite a great deal has been done over the last 25 years. There's been a complete transformation in society.
Take us through the decision to republish.
Well, I think initially the first issue, the book was not encouraged. It was banned when it came out. Very few people knew of it or were interested in it at that stage, because of the uncertainty of the times, and there was a limited amount of copies published. And then it became necessary to reissue, mainly because of the consistency in the subject of the biography, and to be able to have snapshots 30 years apart and compare.
Yeah. It's an important comparison. When I read the book, I thought it is such an important publication, particularly for the youth segment of our country, but also for yourself, viewed as a political protagonist, but you also need to be viewed as a human being. Because when you mention the name Robert McBride, people think of bombings and an activist, but there was a purpose to the process, wasn't there? What can be done to bring in young South Africans into the comprehension of the processes that had to be undertaken in that day and age to bring about liberation in South Africa?
Well, I think in any event you have a dynamic youth now in South Africa, and they have different orientation or perspective on issues and what's important for them, and that is correct. The same as we were different from our parents, and it's always the youth in every generation that actually makes the changes, that affects it. So I have, from what I've seen, I don't have any hesitation or doubt that the youth of today will deal with today's socio-economic problems.
Times.
Yeah.
In fact, as we speak today, the reason why we had to delay our conversation was because of the coronavirus outbreak. What are your thoughts about South Africa's readiness and reactions to this outbreak?
Well, I think the numbers speak for themselves. South Africans are ready, and we've been known to rise to the occasion under any emergency. And we are good at coordination. We might take some time to get warmed up, but when we are organized and together, we are unconquerable. So I don't foresee any spread in South Africa. I think we've got it under control. I don't think there's going to be problems. So I would say no need to panic. We have been activated. We are roused now, and South Africa roused is unstoppable. Yeah. So we'll be able to deal with it. Yeah.
You're one of a few anti-apartheid activists who have done their bit, and your role is well documented, and you continue to not only be a public servant but also an activist. Let's just go back a bit to Robert McBride growing up and the decisions that led you to where you are now.
Well, I think the first thing is that to live under apartheid with a clear conscience became untenable. And the turmoil that thousands of other individuals faced, that we cannot coexist with the system. We have to destroy it. From the side of the apartheid regime, they ensured that there was no non-violent resistance possible. And they increased in brutality. Some of it is captured in Mo Sheikh's book, The Spy Bible, which is about to launch this coming week.
And we are awaiting that launch.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And the issue is that we had to take up arms. And even before we were born, the Rivonia trialists decided to take up arms. So the situation was untenable many years before we were born. And yeah, when we were young teenagers now, 20 years later, the situation had worsened, and therefore it became much more a demand from the youth, from the country, to stand up. And thousands did. To make it clear, I was not the only one. Thousands of the youth from all walks of life stood up and rose to the occasion.
You speak about Mo Sheikh and the imminent release of his book.
Yes.
Both you and him have had to go to the State Capture Commission to present your cases there.
Yes.
And in that eventuality, one of the things you said was that the forebears of this democracy created such a sustainable environment to make sure that there is justice. There are institutions such as the South African Police Services, the DPCI Special Investigative Unit, the National Prosecuting Authority, and as a result, there was really no need for there to be a State Capture Commission. What do you mean?
Well, the issue is a lot. The stuff is what I deal with now at my present job is looking at integrity of institutions, integrity of individuals, instilling the ethics infrastructure, and doing
just for the benefit of our viewer, tell us what the job is.
Well, it's basically the Ethics Enforcement Unit, DPSA, for Public Service and Administration, and my job was to establish the unit, which I've done now. So I've handed over what has been completed, and then hopefully I'll move on to another similar mission. So that's what we'll do. So it's an issue of, so no matter how good your system is and how good your your institutions, or if you don't have the right people in place, or you have people put in place for wrong reasons, you will have problems. So you have to have this perpetual vigilance, and that's the price of democracy.
So how would you respond to the current question of the doubts around the ability to succeed of the State Capture Commission?
Well, I think there's already a turnaround, but a lot has not been done over a long period. So the result is that the extent and depth of state capture, or of wrong appointments, or of unqualified appointments, or of questionable appointments, and systems and policies not being in place, together have impacted on how the entire system works. So we need to start correcting that, and we are in the process of that. And the quicker we get involved in trying to re-establish normality, the better. So it'd be important for us not to be caught up in this situation of really lamenting what has happened the last 15 years, but to get down to it, shoulder to the wheel, and put your effort in to change things around you.
You speak about lamenting what happened in the last 15 years, but there are bigger concerns about what is current.
Yeah.
As you say that you're working on turning around the systems, there's concerns about factionalism within the African National Congress, and a sense that that's holding back progress. So you say now you've just completed a project. What are the chances of success for that project?
Oh, well, there's always been, I mean, within my organization, the ANC, there's always been fascism. We regard it as a broad church, so you have lots of opinions, and some interpreted them as...
It's a problem when it holds back progress, though.
That's it. So the issue is that the ethical fiber and integrity of our cadres, those who hold positions, elected in positions, needs to be checked also. So our organization must do its own checks to make sure the right people are deployed in the right places. But we will come through it. We've had splits from the 40s, from the 50s. We've had splits in the 90s. We've had splits in the 2000s.
It was a different time.
Yeah, so the ANC will see it through, but it will not go through unscathed. But it will come through because the policies, the orientation is correct. Of course, people, and I think the former President Mbeki referred to them as careerists, they're having a go, an opportunity, not for the right reasons.
By virtue of being in government, the ANC is then not only accountable to its membership, but also to South African citizens.
Absolutely. And that's a bigger burden we should always be conscious that we hold. So it's not only to our movement, but to the mandate we've been given by the people. There's some people who vote for the ANC don't vote, they are not ANC members, but they believe in the policies and they want to see it work. So we have it's incumbent upon us that we live up to the expectations and we deliver to the best of our ability. Corruption limits, erodes our ability to serve effectively and to serve, efficiently.
You say that you've been appointed to a position where you deal with ethics and the revival of proper structures.
Yes.
If government trusts Robert McBride enough to put you in a situation like that, how do we speak to the skeptics who view Robert McBride as the hothead who bombs bars?
Yeah, well, look, the operations under Umkhonto we Sizwe were part of a organized, internationally recognized movement, campaign against the crime against humanity. There's nothing about being involved in the armed struggle that I'm concerned about or embarrassed about. Indeed, one of our Nobel Peace Prize winners was the first commander of Umkhonto we Sizwe, that was Nelson Mandela. So Nelson Mandela was also regarded as a hothead, including by his own ANC comrades at the time. When he decided to form Umkhonto we Sizwe, there were others who were against it and opposed it. But maybe his hot-headedness, maybe his stubbornness, saw it through, and the organization, for the first time after many years, the idea of military resistance to apartheid was born. That in itself, just the idea was revolutionary. And then came our generation, 20 years later. So the same militancy must see itself through for change.
And then later, another generation, Julius Malema, also considered a hothead, but also considered leadership material, which he has proven with the formation of his own political party. What are your thoughts about Julius Malema's strategy, especially in relation to interactions in Parliament?
I think first, let me cover when he was the object of ridicule and about how he did in matric. He went and get his degree. He went and get himself fit. He lost weight. He got strong, and he made sure all those around him studied and did well. So for that, the resilience one has to admire. I do not agree with, and I strongly will condemn some of the tactics used. Parliament is for talking. It's where we discuss. Now, it might have worked before when they had a go at former President Zuma. But I think it's not necessary for them. They have to start planning to become statesmen and mature people. Even Mandela mellowed at some stage. Even Robert McBride mellowed at some stage. And you are representative of people. In Parliament, you have power, which is given to you as a mandate, so you should bear that in mind. So just as the ANC has its constituency, it has to be responsible to, so does the Comrade Julius Malema and the EFF also have a responsibility to those who elected them, and the rest of society who didn't elect them. They are a minority in Parliament, so they should respect the rest. But as ability to organize, you have to grant them they've been able to move quite far very quickly.
There's a confusion that gets created when you spoke about a broad church earlier. When Robert McBride comes from the African National Congress and he's given a senior position, but there's seemingly always a tussle between Robert McBride and your Bheki Cele and... What is the ordinary citizen, how's the ordinary citizen supposed to view this? And I want to put in there a question about your story, especially about your fight against apartheid. Could be the story of any other anti-apartheid activist. What do you think is it that has made Robert McBride stand out as opposed to the next guy?
Well, I think the issue is, as you would see, and it's good the book is there, if you study the book and as a snapshot, there's consistency. So the issue is I will not bow to corruption. I will not bow to brutality. I will take bullies on. And I've learned early in life that bullies also bleed. So I will not allow myself to be bullied wherever I am, whether I'm on the gallows, whether I'm free, whether I'm holding a position. I will do what's right and no one will turn me away from it. And that's what we were taught by our leadership before us. Nelson Mandela was going to be sentenced to death when he said to the entire court, well, he wants to live for these ideals, but if you guys want to execute me, you want to kill me, I'm willing to die.
I wanted to zone in on that area of bullying in the book where it's quite unbelievable that a person of your stature at some point was bullied, but also because it's such an important feature of life right now in South Africa. Young people challenged by bullying, which I'm already told in my ear that our time is up.
That's okay.
It's difficult to have a person such as yourself in the studio and not only focus on the contents of the book, but it's such a beautifully written book. Bryan Rostron did such an amazing job, and would encourage South Africans really to, read the book. Do you find that there has been a good
they fly off the shelves.
I know, they're out of stock. But congratulations once again to yourself and Bryan, and thanks for making the time.
And thanks for having me. Thank you very
Robert McBride. And the name of the book, The Struggle Continues. It's a worthwhile read, I must say.
Thanks.
All right, let's take a break. You're watching The Agenda.